Good evening. The Pan Democrats' proposal to allow the public to nominate candidates in the 2017 chief executive election has again been described as against the Basic Law by a central government official in Hong Kong. But a Basic Law Committee member says that doesn't necessarily mean Beijing has totally ruled out public participation in the nomination process. Ronnie Samtani has more.
After the head of the central government's liaison office, Zhang Xiaoming, said earlier that the idea of allowing the collection of public signatures to nominate candidates for the 2017 chief executive election did not comply with the Basic Law, his second-in-command repeated the same argument today. Deputy Director Huang Langfa said at a Basic Law seminar this morning that even though the idea proposed by the Pan Democrats may seem more open and fair, it is simply impossible because Hong Kong's mini-constitution stipulates that a nomination committee is responsible for choosing candidates. But Basic Law Committee member Albert Chan says although Beijing is against the idea, it has not ruled out public participation in the nomination process altogether.
So the nominating committee is the only authority, the sole authority for making nominations. Citizens may participate in the nomination process by various means, but as far as I understand, citizens cannot directly jointly nominate a candidate who will then immediately stand for the CE election.
Occupy Central organizer Chan Kin-man argued that if people are willing to work together, there may be creative ways to work through technical issues for solutions that are within the framework of the Basic Law. And while the public awaits the government to begin an official consultation process on election reform, Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam refused to confirm today if she has been chosen to lead a new political reform task force.
As the Chief Secretary for Administration, I will certainly play a very active role in the constitutional development discussions because constitutional development, particularly in developing and reaching the goal of universal suffrage for the chief executive in 2017, is not just a constitutional or an election matter. It is also very important to the governance of Hong Kong.
The Secretary for Transport and Housing pointed out today that Hong Kong's housing demand for the next 30 years is almost equivalent to building one Sha Tin new town every decade. But a geography professor has pointed out that what the city needs most isn't endless supply, but to know when to curb demand. With a new long-term housing goal set at 470,000 homes in the next 10 years, Anthony Cheung addressed the long-running issue of home supply at a surveyor forum this morning.
It is estimated that Hong Kong will need to build the equivalent of one new town per decade, or 3 new towns, roughly the scale of Sha Tin, within 30 years. There are trade-offs and choices to be made. We need to bear collective responsibility, and if we don't make the hard choices today, those hard choices that have to be made by our next generation will be even more difficult.
In the face of opposition by those in the property business, Cheung also made a choice to stand firm on the need to keep the property cooling measures introduced earlier. He told the press that the government is, however, open to compromise on concrete suggestions. With finding land supply a key task at hand, the government has sparked recent controversy by suggesting the possibility of making use of country park land. A former director of the Hong Kong Observatory had earlier criticised the idea as a cancer that would only spread to the demise of the city. Speaking to TVB News today, Lam Chew Ying insisted what the SAR really needs is to figure out its carrying capacity.
Every city has its own natural limits. Actually, we have to remember why China chose Guangzhou and not Hong Kong as the door to the world was that Hong Kong was too small, too hilly. We must work out the carrying capacity of Hong Kong in terms of population, finding a solution to the housing problem must ultimately depend on deciding on the upper limit of the population of Hong Kong.
Lam said there's a lot of usable flat land that's being wasted in the new territories. He urged landowners to contribute to the greater good of the city and sell the unused land to the government. Preparations are underway for the Chief Executive's third public forum in Wan Chai tomorrow. The streets surrounding the Tang Shui Kien Victoria Government School, where the event will be held, are being cleaned, and police are setting up crowd control barriers. Several people are already lining up by the Leighton Hill Community Hall, where admission tickets will be distributed from 9 a.m. tomorrow. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying will be joined at the event by Secretary for Transport and Housing Anthony Cheung and Secretary for Labour and Welfare Matthew Cheung.
United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is reportedly planning to present to the Security Council on Monday the chemical weapons investigators' report on Syria. Reports say the investigators will not explicitly blame anyone for last month's poison gas attack in Syria, but diplomats say their factual reporting alone could suggest which side in the civil war was responsible. Alan Booknear reports.
Speaking at a United Nations forum in New York, the World Body's Secretary General said he hadn't yet seen the investigators' report, which will be delivered Monday.
But I believe that the report will be an overwhelming report that the chemical weapons was used, even though I cannot publicly say at this time before I received this report.
The UN inspectors have a mandate to determine whether chemical weapons were used, not to establish responsibility. The UN chief wouldn't comment on that, but still had harsh words for Assad.
He has committed many crimes against humanity. And therefore, I'm sure that there will be surely the process of accountability when everything is over. But at this time, first and foremost, we have to help the fighting stop and dialogue, talking begin.
In Switzerland, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said the prospects of resuming the Syrian peace process ride on the outcome of the U.S.-Russia talks aimed at securing Syria's chemical weapons arsenal. Kerry had just finished 2 days of meetings with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
I think we would both agree that we had constructive conversations regarding that, but those conversations are continuing.
Lavrov said he was also hopeful the talks could lead to a new round of Syrian peace negotiations, last held in Geneva in June 2012.
Russia, the Russian president, from the very beginning of the Syrian conflict, have been promoting a peaceful resolution. And it is very unfortunate that for a long period, the Geneva communique was basically abandoned.
The two plan to meet again in New York around September 28th on the sidelines of a UN General Assembly meeting. They hope a date for a Geneva II conference can be set then. Alan Booknear, TVB News.
The epic flooding in Boulder, Colorado continued today as hundreds of residents left stranded had to be rescued. So far, 4 people have been killed while a number of others remain unaccounted for. As Sonia Artero reports, thousands were driven from their homes due to swollen rivers drowning every structure in their paths.
Floodwaters cascaded downstream from the Colorado Rocky Mountains, transforming scenic mountain rivers into raging torrents of water. This man was nearly buried alive when a deluge of water and mud fell on his house.
We got a call that there was a wall of water coming out, and so we went outside and climbed up above our house, and we heard a big roar, and I think that's probably when it came down, buried his house, filled his bedroom full of mud.
Hundreds more were forced to seek emergency shelters up and down Colorado's heavily populated Front Range. The National Weather Service revealed 12.3 inches of rain have fallen on Boulder this month, smashing a 73-year-old record. Surveying the devastation left many residents in shock.
It's unbelievable. It's amazing. It's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Amazing that more people haven't been hurt. I'm sure the property damage is going to be incredible.
Others counted their blessings.
We're alive. That's number one.
But the danger isn't over yet.
So we continue to encourage everybody, stay off bridges, stay away from bridges.
Colorado's worst flooding in over 3 decades is still wreaking havoc, all the way from Denver to Fort Collins. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
The U.S. state of New Jersey faces a colossal loss after a raging fire destroyed most of the iconic seaside boardwalk that was just rebuilt due to Superstorm Sandy. The inferno engulfed at least 30 stores around Seaside Heights, triggering massive smoke plumes that were visible for miles. The fire started in an ice cream shop Thursday afternoon and quickly spread to other stores. Volunteer firefighters from all over the state battled the blaze in waves, and one of them was injured. The newly built Oceanfront Road had just reopened to tourists in June after being battered by Superstorm Sandy. Governor Chris Christie vowed to get to the bottom of what triggered the fire. Violence broke out in the heart of Mexico City yesterday as police forcibly evicted thousands of striking teachers. The teachers had occupied the city's main square for weeks in a bid to block President Enrique Peña Nieto's education reform program. The reforms are aimed at introducing a universal evaluation system for teachers and reducing union discretion in hiring. Authorities had earlier set a Friday afternoon deadline for the protesters to vacate the square to make way for traditional Independence Day celebrations set to be held there on Sunday. Police in full riot gear moved in after 4 p.m, firing tear gas to disperse the crowd. Some protesters put up resistance, throwing sticks and stones in return. But within half an hour, police retook control of the square and much of the historic centre of the city. Authorities say 31 demonstrators were arrested, none of them teachers. Peña Nieto, who took office as president last December, will lead the annual Independence Day celebrations in the capital city's main square for the first time Sunday night. That will be followed by a military parade on Monday.
People in Macau are gearing up for tomorrow's Legislative Assembly elections. One of the key election issues has been the controversial land allocation process for new developments. João da Silva reports.
Eva Chan is a Macau journalist who launched an independent online media platform. She says traditional media in Macau never cover issues related to the fairness of government-led land allocation for new development. And as a reporter, she wants people in Macau to be more inquisitive about that process. The construction of large development projects has continued there after the corruption scandal involving land grants and other deals that led to the downfall of former Secretary for Transport and Public Works, Au Man Long. The enclave's light rail transit system, which had an initial budget of 2.7 billion patakas, has shot up to over 11 billion patakas. An executive-led process which in Macau does not require the approval of the enclave's legislators. The government also enjoys great discretion in awarding development contracts. A company run by an executive council member was recently granted the design contract for a new public hospital which is set to open in 2017. Eva Chan questions why the government constantly complains about a shortage of land and then proceeds to grant land to massive luxury developments without an open tender. Macau's Land Act, which was recently amended to increase transparency, still contains a provision which dictates that land for projects which are related to government policy do not have to be granted through an open contest. Not surprisingly, land allocation is one of the issues figuring prominently in the campaigns of candidates in tomorrow's Legislative Assembly election. One of the candidates, Angela Leung, hints that handing over more oversight powers to legislators would only slow down Macau's development. But new Macau Association candidate Au Kam San says better monitoring would prevent abuses of power. Critics also point out that many legislators there have vested interests, and that is why they don't push for further reform. Commentator Kamonish Tam notes that there is a lot of lobbying going on and explains that the business community prefers dealing directly with the government. Tam also explains that people in Macau do not care so much about land allocation and worry instead about whether the new developments will bring them more jobs. João da Silva, TVB News.
And finally for tonight, there's a new dance craze in Brazil that's credited with steering kids away from crime. They call it the passinho, or little step. It's a mix of samba-like footwork, breakdance, free spins and acrobatics. The dance has teens living in the shantytowns of Rio de Janeiro gliding and popping and shaking and dipping to the rhythm of the music. Passinho has been around for years, but recently became more popular through social media. Dancers are now posting their moves on YouTube and Facebook and drawing thousands of followers. The kids admit dancing keeps them away from gangs and the usual path of crime prevalent in shantytowns. Well, that's nice to see. That's the news for tonight.
Good night.